My F20 mother, F42, has been talking to an Elon Musk scammer. My family and I are unsure of how to go about this. Any advice? First of all, I understand what you are thinking. Yes, my mother truly believes she is in communication with Elon Musk and is mildly obsessed with him now. My apologies for the lengthy post. It is quite the journey. Thank you for taking the time to read. For some background, my mother is very conservative and religious, and she has a history of neglecting and emotionally abusing me. Since I was 10 years old, she fell into a rabbit hole of religious conspiracy theorists, some of whom made a living from their content on YouTube, and she became one of them. She had enough subscribers to earn money from YouTube and did so for several years until she began getting involved in drama and, I suppose, exited the scene. I was neglected throughout my childhood, which forced me to care for my brother while my father worked third shift at a factory. My mother prioritized these conspiracy theories and her faith over the well-being of her children, even now. Since 2020, I have suspected that she may be developing schizophrenia or at least experiencing psychotic episodes. We went on a trip to Florida, and after she entered the ocean, she became convinced that she had sea larvae trapped inside her body, skin, eyes, you name it. Without delving too deeply into it, she constantly picked at her skin, her lips, anything she could think of. Some of her recurrent behaviors included spitting things up and storing them in plastic bags or tissues, believing they were larvae she had coughed or sneezed out. She would not permit anyone to convince her otherwise. She consulted numerous doctors about it, sought medication, got X-rays, and yet never received any help because the doctors were uncertain how to assist her. How can you hold them responsible? This situation persisted for about 3 years, leading up to 2024, when my mother began having episodes in which she thought my father was unfaithful. She noticed markings on doors, walls, and countertops that she believed contained messages, manifested for her to find. She insisted that my father, a 44-year-old man, was dating a bizarre witch named Mystical, who was responsible for those messages. At one point, she even claimed there was a note for me left on their bathroom door, a love letter, and then spent the entire day arguing with me about it. Over the past year, she has remained convinced of my father's infidelity, and while he does not handle the situation ideally, something I cannot blame him for, he now works first shift and always returns home after his work. His paychecks corroborate this. All he has ever wanted is a functional family, as he did not experience one growing up. This resulted in one of many conflicts. I can vividly recall growing up with the impression that they had a pattern of having their annual divorce argument. In recent months, my mother has truly been spiraling, culminating in an actual divorce confrontation. She has been using religion as a way to cope with her unhappy marriage. I am not sure if anyone is familiar with these AI-generated videos designed to resemble a preacher or convey God's messages. They last about 20 to 40 minutes, and my mother watches them in their entirety, crying uncontrollably every waking moment she can. She has become convinced that she is God's chosen one, and that he has plans for her and has been communicating with her. There are also mentions of a new secret Bible, discovered in sunken scrolls that the government allegedly does not want us to learn about. In November, she started communicating with Elon Musk, whom I suspect is a scammer, and he advised her to convert all her money into cryptocurrency. She claims to possess the gift of discernment and believes she can detect when something is amiss, insisting she feels no such apprehension now. She speaks with this scammer daily and believes they are friends. He has even mentioned that she will join the International Space Station. She follows the real Elon on Twitter, subscribes to him, and responds to both parody and genuine tweets, and it's practically all she talks about. She is fixated. About a week to a week and a half ago, she left in the middle of the night unexpectedly, without informing anyone of her whereabouts. It turned out she was at a hotel, but not for the reason one might assume. She claimed God instructed her to drive until she reached a military base over an hour or two away, and after leaving the base, she received a message from a military general on Skype. This prompted my father to seek a genuine divorce, and they did not speak for days until they reconciled on her birthday, if you understand what I mean. However, just 3 days ago, my mother did the same thing. She left without contacting anyone for over 12 hours, and still has not made any effort to do so. The major issue here is that she removed $800 from her and my father's bank account and converted it to a certain app where money is deposited, starting with a C, which I think the moderators may disapprove of. Recently, my grandmother mentioned that my mother appeared at her door yesterday morning asking for money. Why would she need money if she has $800? My assumption is that she handed all her money over to these scammers. For context, I should mention that I have religious trauma. I do not practice any religion and do not believe in any of this. In conclusion, it has been over 48 hours without knowing what to do from here. I would greatly appreciate any kind of input, even if you are just here to tell me my mother is irrational and hopeless, as I can concur with that. Right now, I genuinely need validation. Thank you to all who have taken the time to read this. I appreciate it. I will try to answer any questions when I am able to do so. Story 2. My older brother is my mother's golden child, and now he thinks he's entitled to an opinion in my life. Hello, Reddit. This is my first time posting on this platform, and I'm uncertain if I'm doing it correctly. Additionally, English is not my first language, so I apologize for any typos. I, 19 female, live with my mother, 52 female, and my older brother, whom I will refer to as S26 male, for convenience. I have another older brother, 29 male, whom I will call L, but he no longer lives with us. For some context, L is the oldest brother and used to be the man of the house, after our mother expelled our father when I was born due to infidelity. L often had to look after both S and me because our mother was busy trying to make ends meet. S was the only child to confront our mother, blaming her and arguing with her constantly for not being able to maintain her marriage, as he was much closer to our father. He was also quite spoiled due to the numerous respiratory issues he faced from birth, which almost took his life several times. This led him to become the golden child in our mother's eyes. She consistently claims he is right even when he is not, and allows him to treat her rudely as if she never contradicts him. After we grew older, L finally got married and moved out to start his own family, which made us believe he now held the man of the house title, and that's when everything began to fall apart. Now, regarding the problem. In my country, we have to take numerous tests. I'm unsure how to translate this, maybe as exams, based on our high school knowledge. I took the same exam for 2 consecutive years because gaining admission to college here is quite challenging due to the inequalities prevalent in this country. Essentially, wealthy individuals gain entry into public colleges because they have access to better studying resources that public high school students do not, making admission extremely competitive. This year, I improved my rank from 48th place to 7th with my score, which is quite commendable, considering I studied at home with various online resources. I usually try to avoid discussing anything related to college, or anything at all, with S due to his tendency to be unhappy and criticize any situation until it aligns with his views. This even occurred during my birthday celebrations in previous years. I eventually gave up on planning since he consistently complains about every minor detail. I was delighted with my grades and was ready to share the news with my mother, but he interrupted and started lecturing me about how poor my grades were, claiming I would never gain admission to college, accusing me of procrastinating instead of studying relentlessly, and criticizing me for spending time at my boyfriend's house almost every weekend. He lives nearly 2 hours away. I barely see him each month, and his house and family have become a safe haven for me, as I have never experienced love like the affection they show me, instead of focusing on my studies. He insists that my lack of a private room and the noise when everyone is at home are mere excuses for not studying whenever he comes home, as he loves playing loud music, and my mother tends to speak loudly, making it difficult for me to study at the kitchen table since I do not have a bedroom. When I confronted him about these accusations, he began throwing falsehoods at me, claiming I don't help around the house, labeling me as a lazy and worthless leech who should finally gain some perspective. However, the truth is, ever since Elle left home, I have been caring for both my mother and him, as they rarely clean the house and leave a mountain of dirty dishes for me to handle. No one cleans them if I don't. My mother is too sensitive to act like an actual parent, so I have had to guide her and encourage her to stand up for herself. The only accurate observation he made was that I stay up too late and wake up too late. That conversation escalated into a lot of shouting, tears on my end, as I began experiencing a severe anxiety attack and slamming doors. Ultimately, I found myself in my mother's room. I share it with her, crying and trying to calm down while she went to assist her adult son. He then chose to burst into the room to apologize to me. In the midst of my panic attack, I cried and practically pleaded with him to leave me alone for a while, since I was unable to listen to him at that moment due to my overwhelming panic and shaking, which only inflamed the situation. He yelled at me, accusing me of being ungrateful, claiming I should listen to him as he did to others at my age, saying I simply didn't want to listen, and then he departed, shutting his door behind him. My mother simply supported him and left me alone to cry for hours until I eventually fell asleep, completely siding with him. I have not spoken to him today and have avoided conversing with my mother more than necessary, only about household chores and our grocery trip today, as I am quite hurt by both of them. All I wanted was to celebrate achieving a better position for my dream college and to have someone by my side. I am unsure if I am in the wrong for wanting that, or even for asking for space at that moment, or if I should have just accepted it and listened. Most of the time, I am confident in my actions, but they consistently make me feel like I am merely an overly sensitive brat, that I am always wrong, and that I am not supposed to have feelings or any time to myself. I apologize for the lengthy post. I truly tried to provide as much context as possible, but there is so much more that needs to be said. Yes, I am undergoing therapy and have some professional diagnoses about myself that I don't believe are necessary to share here. Any assurance or advice would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for listening, Reddit. Story 3. Is lack of trust a ticking time bomb? How do I, a 27F, build trust in my relationship with a 27M without enabling trust issues? I, a 27-year-old female, have been in a relationship with my partner, a 27-year-old male. For 4 years now, half of that time has been long distance since we both relocated to different countries for our studies. I have enjoyed living abroad and wished to continue, while he disliked where he lived and returned to our home country. The long-distance situation has generally been good as we are very consistent and talk every day. However, one of our major issues is his lack of trust in me. Initially, I made efforts to address his trust issues by sharing my phone password and letting him know my whereabouts, such as texting him when I leave home or return to college, which I was really reluctant to do, but I didn't want him to think I was hiding something. If I occasionally forgot to update him or mentioned it after the fact, he would react angrily. I felt a profound guilt for not being able to complete such simple actions to alleviate his anxiety. I regret how easily I concluded that I was a terrible girlfriend. Embarrassingly, this has led me to feel unworthy of support like friendship and nourishment. But I have recently acknowledged that this mindset is harmful, and I am seeking help for it. My attitude toward updating him began to sour after a year of doing it, which I had warned him could happen. I started setting reminders to text him when I arrived home because, due to my ADHD, I would often become anxious about not doing it, which occupied a lot of my mental energy. I dislike that I began to roll my eyes at the sight of the reminders. I do not want my relationship to feel like a set of obligations. For me, it recalls the need to report to my parents before I moved abroad, while to him, it is about safety. However, if it is truly about safety, why does he become upset with me when I forget? Why does he lack trust in me when I explain that I simply forgot? Shouldn't he be grateful that I am safe? About a year and a half into our long-distance relationship, I expressed that I did not want to continue this practice, and he was upset, arguing that he does so much for me, yet I cannot send him a single message. I suggested sharing my location with him at all times instead, but he stated that he does not want to be part of that type of relationship. He struggles with trust because his previous partners have cheated on him. However, it is challenging to feel as though one is not trusted. Initially, whenever he displayed distrust, it felt as if he was harming our relationship. Now, however, it seems to affect me personally and my self-image. I constantly feel like I am doing something wrong and worry about how he might misinterpret my actions before taking them. I dislike that I am calculating my words to ensure he does not find imagined flaws in them. I often wonder how to phrase things so he will receive them well, which only increases my anxiety and perpetuates the cycle of suspicion. I am not entirely blameless. About 5 months ago, I attended a game night at a friend's house and did not specify which friend it was because my boyfriend did not trust this individual, and I knew he would make me feel guilty for spending time with him by making snide remarks. When my boyfriend called, I mentioned I was at his residence, and he hung up on me, then confronted me angrily when I returned home. I arrived home around 2 a.m., but I was never alone with this person. I was playing games with a group of over 15 people. I should have informed him whose house I was visiting, but my partner had an unreasonable disdain for this individual from the outset. I transitioned from seeing this friend twice a week in college to once every 2 or 3 weeks due to my partner's feelings, and he would still cause problems by making me feel guilty. He even stated that he would not communicate with me if I were with this friend, despite the fact that I always moved to another room to talk to my partner when he called. I dislike having to decline invitations from friends because it would be too burdensome to explain to my partner that this friend would be there. Back home, I lived with family and had no freedom to leave the house without someone accompanying me. I was required to inform my mother about my whereabouts, who I was with, and when I would return at the age of 23. It is unfortunate to admit, but that was the environment where my relationship functioned best when he was not controlling, but I still felt controlled. He acted as though he comprehended my situation, but now he is behaving in the same manner. I feel as though I will never be trusted by anyone in my life. I even lost my best friend 2 years ago because she chose to believe her manipulative roommate over me. The only individuals who genuinely trust me to always make ethical choices and take care of myself are myself, my brother, and my close friends. I just do not understand why. I hold myself to an extremely high moral standard and am typically the voice of reason when my loved ones consider making poor choices. What is it about me that makes me appear untrustworthy? I would not even describe myself as a particularly sexual person. I have never even experienced an orgasm. I have only been intimate with my partner. Until recently, everyone knew me as someone who was deeply in love with him. However, I cannot deny that my friends and colleagues have noticed a change in me over the past 4 months and are genuinely concerned for my well-being. I want to resolve this. I want to progress. But we are so distanced, we can only meet once or twice a year. Due to visa complications, we can only live together after marriage, and I am starting to worry that this problem will escalate significantly after we wed. Nonetheless, I still wish to marry him. I love him. I do not want to end this. I want to find a solution. Story 4. I emotionally abused my boyfriend and triggered a second episode of psychosis. I, 26 female, met my boyfriend, 29 male, when I was 22 and he was 25. I was employed as a sex worker and had been since I was 18. I did not have any prior relationships before him. I actually lost my virginity to my first client, to put it that way. We began spending time together outside of work very quickly, during which I became infatuated with him and developed a crippling emotional dependency. I attribute this to my social isolation, as well as possibly having an undiagnosed personality disorder. While I was infatuated with him, I think deep down I did not truly care for him. I viewed him as someone who would rescue me from my unpleasant life and constructed a fantasy around him. He was uncomfortable with me continuing to work as a sex worker, so he did not wish to be with me if I pursued that line of work. I deceived him and claimed that I would quit, despite planning to return to sex work and do it secretly later on. About 10 months into the relationship, he developed psychosis. He smoked a lot of marijuana and has a family history of schizophrenia, so in hindsight, it was somewhat predictable. I eventually reached out to his best friend, who was his roommate at that time. Looking back, I believe I was seeking attention. My boyfriend was hospitalized after some time, and while he was in the psychiatric unit, I became fixated on his best friend and flirted with him, who, understandably, was appalled and rejected me immediately. I even pretended to care for my own boyfriend to gain the approval of this best friend, all while flirting with him. It was very manipulative and bizarre behavior, and I was unsure why I acted as I did at that time. When I visited my boyfriend in the psychiatric unit, he issued me an ultimatum to either marry him or he would leave for Pakistan, at which point I chose to meet this ultimatum through deception. I began lying to him for several months, pretending I wanted to marry him while secretly planning to return to sex work. I went out of my way to essentially perform as the perfect, caring girlfriend when I did not genuinely care about him. I think he started to rely on me emotionally to a significant degree. He was really struggling due to his experiences, and I took advantage of that. This caring girlfriend act also became a means for me to seek validation from his friends and family, confirming how good of a person I am. It was all entirely strange, fabricated, and manipulative. I attempted to return to being a sex worker behind his back, and once I realized I could do that without him discovering, I abruptly ended the relationship. I manipulated him and made it seem as though it was his fault, accusing him of being clingy, when of course, I had been dishonest the entire time. I eventually ghosted him to resume working and did not respond to his calls for several months. During this period, he became suicidal and even formulated a plan for his actions. We eventually got back in touch because he recognized me from an advertisement I had on one of those websites. I fabricated more excuses about returning to sex work due to feeling overwhelmed, which was complete nonsense. I did not confess to lying about my work and my desire to marry him. I did not disclose that I had flirted with his best friend or that I had been fixated on this friend. I ultimately quit sex work for real in August 2023, completed my high school diploma, and began studying at university. When I stopped for a time, these realizations began to weigh heavily on me what I had done to my boyfriend. I believe sex work emotionally numbs me and disconnects me from my feelings, so when I ceased, it was as though I became more aware of how wrong my behavior was, if that makes sense. However, I never considered confessing to him about my actions. In June, we broke up because he discovered that I had flirted with his best friend while he was institutionalized, and that I had been obsessed with that friend for 2 years, as I had documented it somewhere. I think this triggered his second episode of psychosis because he began to show signs of another imminent episode. I ended up calling for an ambulance for him, and he was hospitalized once again after several months. I told him most of what had occurred in detail, but I still have not revealed that I was dishonest the entire time regarding quitting sex work and wanting to marry him. I want to, though. I have started seeing a psychologist who suspects I have borderline personality disorder. I think about it every day. My boyfriend essentially saved my life. Had I not met him, I believe I would have succumbed to alcoholism or died from liver disease. I owe him my life, yet I have never harmed someone more, and I have not attempted to make amends after the fact. He could have taken his own life because of me, and he has even experienced another episode because of my actions.